about the name of Jesus, how to pronounce it. There are some people that are going around claiming that the name Jesus, so pronounced in the English language, is actually a derivative of Jesus. And they come up with some other strange ideas about this very name. And yet, the basics of this are just that the way that you would actually pronounce Jesus, going from Hebrew into Greek and then into English, would simply be Jesus. And I also want to show people that these other derivations, such as Yahushua and Yeshua and all these other ideas, while they're interesting, they're not based on good linguistic evidence. So let's start with the Bible, because that's where we want to really go and look at this. So the basic claim is that the name Jesus is of pagan origin. That some people claim that it's related to Zeus. I don't know where they get that or how they equate these two, but that is the current YouTube and internet rage that people are constantly making claims about. So what I want to do is I want to take us through the text. I want to show a lot of places where the Hebrew word Yehoshua, which is of course Joshua, is then transliterated into the Greek, that is the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and there's no other way to do it. And once you see that, hopefully you'll have some ammunition to answer people as to why the word Jesus is not of pagan origin, and it's really okay to say that. So let's start here in Exodus chapter 17. It says, "So Joshua did as Moses said to him, and fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the mountain." Now let me just put this into the Hebrew for us so that we can look at it. We can all agree that this is the Hebrew word Yehoshua. Okay, so it's right here. Yehoshua. There's no question, right? There is the name of Joshua. All right, the name Joshua, Yehoshua. All right, now when we translate that or transliterate that into the Greek text, how are you going to do it? So people say, well, what? They could have just said, Yeshua. The trouble is, you can't do that because every language has its limitations. It has its phonetic limitations. It just can't do some things. Some languages have the letter B and P. All right, so if you order a Pepsi in America, you can say Pepsi, right, with the letter P as in Paul. But if you go to an Arabic speaking country and you try to order a Pepsi, it's going to be a lot harder. Now, probably the city folk who are more sophisticated linguistically, they've probably heard, these different letters. They probably can do that. But if you go out to the outskirts where people are less familiar with English, they cannot say the letter P because it does not exist in Arabic. So you'll get a Bebsi instead of a Pepsi. All right. Now it doesn't mean that they're not as smart as us or anything like that. It's just that their language is different. That's all it is. And they have phonemes in their language that we can't say. For example, the letter Ein. The letter Ein does not exist in English, and so I had to practice a long time to be able to do that. And I still don't do it as well as a native speaking Arab person who speaks Arabic, of course. And they can do it because they were saying that letter. It was down here in their throat. They were pronouncing it since the day they were born. They were practicing that letter, and so they can do it with great ease. I can do it, but it takes me a little bit of effort to do that because I don't use it on a daily basis. So there's just different letters. Also, when we go from Hebrew Yehoshua into Greek, we have some real limitations. Okay, so first of all, we don't have the letter H or the He in Hebrew. There is no equivalent in the middle of a Greek word. Okay, there's no way to put the letter H in the middle of a Greek word. Just as in English, we sometimes do it. We can say cohort, right? But there's no such thing as the H in the middle of a Greek word. So how would you write Yeho? That's our first hurdle. There's no Yeho. The He in the middle cannot be reproduced in Greek writing. So we have a real problem. The second problem is that we have the word sh, or the letter sh, the phoneme, and there's no equivalent of sh in Greek. There's only s, or sigma. So we're going to lose that sibilant, the sh, and it's just going to go down to the letter s, or the sigma. So we've lost that. And then the last thing is that we don't have this ein. The ein, which is a guttural sound, it's the ah. It's that same feeling you get when you're about to throw up. It's that same, that's where you produce that ah way down here. And there's no equivalent for that in the Greek language. So when we're going to go from Yahushua into Greek, the only way to do it is to reduce the vowels, reduce the phonemes to a more simplified, if you will, version of that. And if we take a look now in the Greek, we'll see that it comes out. Okay, remember now this is Septuagint. The Septuagint was written approximately 200 years, 280 some years before the time of Jesus. All right, and those numbers fluctuate just a little bit, but that's roughly the time that we're looking at. Okay, so here you have it right in the Greek, Yesous. Okay, so this is not this word right here. I'm going to make that bigger so everybody can see it. This is not passing through Christianity. It's not passing through some pagan thing. This is going from a Hebrew text, of course, transmitted to us by the Jewish people, and then it's translated into Greek by Jewish people who are believers in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they translate this, of course, the whole text, into Greek. And so here they've come up with a name, Joshua. They're not thinking about Jesus of Nazareth. They're not thinking about, what Jesus and all of that entails and what he'll become. And they're not thinking any of that stuff. They're only thinking about Yehoshua. And how do you transliterate that into the Greek language? Well, the only way you can do it is Yesous. That's it, right there. Now, this should be enough evidence to show us that this idea that the word Yesous, or Jesus, is somehow pagan. I mean, that's really quite ridiculous. And people say, well, there was no letter J way back then. Well, that's true. We all agree with that. But you see, the letter J used to be pronounced Y in Romance languages, and in Latin, of course, it was pronounced Y. So what happened then is it went from Y, and then it made its way into English, and it just went from Y to J. That's it. Y to J. Just a small little change. So the letter J used to represent the letter or the sound Y, which of course in both Hebrew and Greek you have the Y. So here you have the Ye. So here's the Yota, right? The Yota, and then the Eta is a Ye. And then in Hebrew we have a very similar thing. We have the letter Yud, or Yod. All right, and so there it is. It's the Y. So then it gets transliterated into Latin, of course, in Greek, obviously, with the Y sound, and then it makes its way to English, and it goes from Y to J. But that doesn't mean that it's Jesus or something like that. These ideas that people come up with are pretty strange indeed, but they're not based on anything linguistically speaking. We simply have to go to the Septuagint, and there we find the answers readily available for us if we're interested in looking. And I just want to show you some other examples of some other examples that we can look at to get an idea of how this word is used. All right, so I've just gone through and I've just done a quick search on the word Yesous. All right, and I can, again, Yesous here talking about Joshua, Yehoshua. Right? So here we have it, Yesous, Yesous. All right, now that's actually a different word, but here we have Yesous, Yesous. Right? So that is used a bunch of times. Now I'm going to just do it so that we get only whole words. We don't get any other variations of that, so we can see exactly. Oh, now it's searching something else. One second. Let me just go ahead and pull this back here, and we will do that search again so that you guys can see that. All right, so it's used 644 times in the Greek text. These are all Yesous, Joshua, 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 Joshua. It's used again and again and again to talk about this person that we know as Joshua or Yahushua. All right, so that's the first part of the linguistic evidence, is that the word Jesus or Jesus is really the only way that you can actually write Yehoshua in Greek with Greek letters. You're transliterating it. They didn't translate the name. If they had wanted to translate it, they would have translated it as Soter or something like that. But they were transliterating this because the word Yehoshua literally means Yehovah saves, right? So they could have translated the word as Yehovah Soter or something like that. But you generally don't translate names. You generally transliterate names. That is, you take them from one writing system and you put them into another writing system. Right? Really, that's it. And so that's what they were doing, is they were rendering this into the Greek writing system. And the only way to render Yehoshua into the Greek writing system is to you have to let the he go, because that doesn't transliterate into Greek. You have to let the sh go, because that doesn't transliterate into the Greek system. And the ayin also falls off. And what do you end up with? Yesous. And then Yesous is going to make its way, of course, into the New Testament as well. And it's going to eventually make its way into English. And that Yesous becomes a Jesus, okay, until eventually our pronunciation of that changes, just because, as words travel, as words go to different parts and different lands, we all have a different accent, right? That's why we can say, you're not from around these parts, are you? Right? You're from New York City, right? Now, forgive my terrible Texan accent, but again, that's the point, is that Texan sounds kind of funny to me, and New York sounds kind of funny to me, but I sound kind of funny to them, because we all have different accents, and that's all we're arguing about here, is the different accent. Now let's turn our attention to what was happening in the first century. This is really significant, because what was happening in the first century is going to help us to understand that we're discussing the evidence that we have that the name Jesus is the popular name. Shimon was a popular name, and of course Joshua. Why Joshua? Well, because he was the second leader of Israel, right? And he took everybody into the promised land. He was a special guy. And so now they're going to have this name. It's very popular. This is on an ossuary. Of course, it's not the Jesus that we know, because his bones were never put into an ossuary. He rose to heaven. So here we have it. We have the Yud, and I just want to make sure that you can see this here. So here is the letter Yud, followed by the Sheen. Okay, so right there is that Sheen. The Sheen, right? So you can see the three lines there are the Sheen, and then the Vav right here, and the Ayin. The Ayin. Okay, so Yud, Sheen, Vav, Ayin. What does that spell? Yeshua. Yeshua. Not Yahushua. Again, there's no, if it were Yahushua, as some people claim, then there would be a hey in here. But there's no, either be a hey or a het, depending on how you think that ought to be. But that would be really weird. That's just not how Hebrew works. And of course, we don't see the evidence of that. If you can show the evidence, then you might have a better case. But there is no evidence of that. And so right here, this is a very common name, once again, is we have this Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin. And the way that you pronounce that is Yeshua. That's it. Yeshua. All right, so Yeshua is a shortened form of Yehoshua, of course. And it's now very common in the first century. I want to just show there's a lot of inscriptions that have this so that people can see this name from all over. So once again, Yeshua, this is a name inscribed on the stone coffin around 100 AD. All right, so there it is again. Yud, Shin, it's Vav, and Ayin. It's stylized just a little bit differently, but it's almost identical. Yud, Shin, Vav, and Ayin. So we have this again and again and again. There's so much evidence about this name that we really don't need to guess. We don't have to go out there and say, well, what could this name be? Was it Yeshua? Was it Yahushua? None of those existed. That's not how Hebrew works, and that is not what the evidence shows us. So, his first century Hebrew name was Yeshua. If you want to go back to the historical name that he would have had in the Bible, then it would have been of Yehoshua, which is a cool name, right? Because God says he'll put his name in him, right? So Yehovah saves. That's pretty awesome. That's a great name. But by the first century, that had been shortened to Yeshua. That's no different than what we have today. My full name is Douglas, but I go by the name Doug. Thomas, but he goes by Tom. Michael goes by Mike, right? James goes by Jim. And so many names go on and on and on like that, where we have a shortened form because we're tired of saying the longer form, Wilfred, and we just say Will, right? Or William becomes Bill. I mean, and on these nicknames go, and that's not so much a nickname, but we have just a shortening of this in the first century. All right, so we know that it's Yeshua. All the linguistic evidence points to that. And we know that the name Yehoshua, when it's transliterated directly from the Hebrew into the Greek, way before Jesus, way before the New Testament, is done as Yesous. And then Yesous is going to make its way into the Romance languages, into the Germanic languages, and eventually into English as Jesus, and then the Y becomes a J, and we have Jesus. So we need to help people that are sort of the name police out there that are telling us that we can't say the name Jesus because if we do, we're saying some pagan god. That's just not true. It's not Jesus. There's no relationship at all to the name Zeus. People that are suggesting that just don't know their linguistics very well, where it's okay to say the name Jesus. I think it's cool to say the name Yeshua. It's cool to say Yehoshua. But rather than getting pretentious about this, you may want to learn to actually learn how to say that. Can you say it with the ayin? Can you really do that? Or are you just pretending? So I'm not saying we can't say Yehoshua or Yeshua. That's fine. But let's not badger those people that want to say Jesus, because Jesus is a perfectly good ancient transliteration that was already put in place for us long before the days of Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Christ that we know and love. So the evidence is very powerful, the evidence is clear, and the idea that we have to say Yahushua or Yeshua is not there, and it's okay and it's good to call on the name